Welcome to Take It from the Iron Woman. My name is Susanne Müller, your host and the Iron Woman. This podcast is about empowering yourself and others to make real changes in the world. You will hear from everyday, smart, sophisticated, hip people like you and me. Not everybody has to be an Iron Woman to impress the world. Together, we will learn from the sports and business leaders how you can become a more successful person as an entrepreneur or a leader. It's one step at a time, one day at a time. Take your steps now. Take your big steps now. Join me on this journey to success. Take it from the Iron Woman. We only have special guests, and today we talk to SB Rawz. And when you read her LinkedIn profile, it says, you don't need to be fixed. You're not broken. What you do need is a megaphone for your internal wisdom, a chisel to break away the old beliefs and behaviors that aren't benefiting you anymore, and a walking stick to make the ascent of your learning curve easier on the knees. Coaching with me is all that and more. Tell us more about yourself. This sounds intriguing to me.
It's so funny to hear that read back, and I stand by it 100%. It's definitely my philosophy and my life experience, Suzanne, that as we go through our early lives, we sort of gather up information about the world that sometimes obscures who we actually are and our own wisdom, not necessarily through malice or even hardship, but just part of being human in a human world can be very complex and confusing. And then we have the opportunity as adults, if we choose it, to say, okay, what of what I have picked up over the years is actually mine? And what of it am I ready to lay down because it's not actually mine? To me, that's the great joy of coaching, is helping people see themselves with greater clarity and more fully.
And how did you get to where you are today?
It's a very squiggly line on a map. I knew from a very early age that I wanted to be self-employed, and I knew that being a part of world change and being helpful to other humans was important to me. And it was a real dipsy-do of a path that included a real hard time trying to work with teens and foster care, and then really turning hard toward the entrepreneurial piece. I was a personal chef, and I co-owned a couple of IT businesses and a consultancy that focused on micro businesses when Etsy was getting started up. Along the way through networking, which I'm a huge, huge networking fan. I like to advocate treating networking just as relationship building, nothing more, but also nothing less. I met an executive coach who said, you're a coach, stop fooling around. And we had that conversation for 2 years. And then I said, you're right, I'm going to go do that. And it has just been wonderful to be 10 years of coaching this summer. And it's just been absolutely heart-filling and delightful and just deeply wonderful in so many ways.
I like to hear those stories. We try to find a career in a way, and then somebody needs to tell you, hey, you might be a good coach. Oh, I never thought of that.
Yeah. Gosh, I just think that's one of the really wonderful parts about connecting with other humans is life has so many hidden nooks and crannies that other people know lots of stuff we don't know. And how might they illuminate both what really resonates with us and perhaps what really doesn't? Either way, we've got more information than we had.
And sometimes I feel like as a coach, even if you don't know the area that people come from, you can ask different questions like, how does that look for you? Or how does great look like? And they tell a story, and then you can pick up a few items from their stories to make it even bigger. You say bigger lives and better business. What is better business?
Really, both of those are talking about more self-honoring and more fully values aligned. What does it look like when we allow ourselves to really take up some space? And what does it look like when we infuse our professional lives with a whole lot of people who are in startup or growth mode? And what does that look like? And what are really I'm far less into the strategy of business. There are a lot of wonderful consultants out there for that, and far more into the emotional aspects. And I think that's a really underexplored part of the business dynamic that, my goodness, starting a business is so vulnerable. Putting your podcast into the world is so vulnerable. And can we notice the normal mechanisms that might be keeping us from approaching that with as much bigness and badness as we might?
Yeah, what do other people think? It might not be good enough. All those saboteur questions that we have. And everybody has it. How can we get out of this?
In my experience, you're right. Everybody has them. And I think acknowledging that everybody has them is really helpful and helps us back away from, it ends up layered. We have the saboteur questions, and then we're mad at ourselves for having them. And then we think we're the only ones who have them. And it just gets harder and harder when we could say, okay, this is part of being human. And it's a particularly uncomfortable part of being human, but a really, really normal part. What do I want to do with this? So I had the personal experience, and I've been able to share it with a lot of clients who have then had their own version of it, of relating to that part of myself with some disdain and some anger and some forcefulness. I'm going to overcome this part of myself. What I've learned and what I've witnessed in others is that, in fact, when we turn toward that part of ourselves with a lot of love and care, and when we recognize that there's a lot of self-love and self-protection underneath those saboteur questions that are presenting in really unhelpful ways, the saboteur questions are really unhelpful, but a lot of love underneath. And when we sort of drill down and find that love underneath and offer that part of us love, oof, sweetheart, inside of me, you're trying so hard to protect me, but you're doing a terrible job of it. I'm going to need you to lighten up and let go. And we tend to make a lot of more progress of getting past those inhibitors.
Yeah. Which is too hard on ourselves. Let's see, you start your own business and you see everybody's successful. How can I be successful? How can I make $1 million the first year? Probably that's the goal or aspiration we have. And then I like that picture when you see success goes up a straight line, but the real success, how success is made, is like many, many ways. Last week, I was listening to some coaches talk, and they say, you need to slow down in order to go faster. You need to slow down in order to go faster. It's about listening to your heart, being nice to yourself, and don't take yourself so serious. The journey is more important than the destination. Yes, we all want to make $1 million, but how you get there is interesting.
I just couldn't agree more. And I'm also a big fan of and advocate for mindfulness in all of its varied forms, because of how it helps us get really solid in the moment and disconnect from the objectives. It's nice to have goals because it gives us a direction, but when we can back off of that and be really fully in the moment, that's where the action's happening.
Yeah. What are your goals?
Oh my goodness. What are my goals? My biggest goal is to lay on my deathbed and look back and say, wow, I used that time pretty well. I did a pretty good job. I did what I could to make a positive impact on the world and to love the heck out of people and to learn to love the heck out of myself. That's a harder stretch for me and for a lot of us. And along the way, if I'm able to coach even more wonderful people, I've had the great pleasure to, in the last 10 years, coach a whole lot of wonderful people. If I get to do more of that, if I get to do more writing and creating and putting inspiring stuff into the world, what a gift that I get to do that.
What are your ideal clients or your dream clients?
My ideal clients are willing to stretch into the play of uncomfortable times. I think we humans have a lot of tendency toward, probably baked into us, toward dichotomies. We want things to we want to be sad at the funerals and happy at the weddings. And yet there's room for grief and joy in every situation. Part of my flavor of life is foolishness, is bringing a real foolish flair to whatever is happening. I occasionally have to back myself up in coaching sessions because I might start laughing at a time that might feel inappropriate to somebody. I have to back up and say, oh, I just delight in seeing you being so human. Look at you. You're in the thick of being human. And oh my goodness, is that not complex and uncomfortable? And don't you just kind of hate it right now? And like, oh, okay. Then we get to have a little breaking through that dichotomy and saying, yeah, it's all here. It's all available.
We need to add more humor, more laughter. When you look at children, they're always, or most of the time, happy and laughing and playing. And then we become adults and then we stop with this. What's wrong with us?
Exactly. Gosh, what is that we don't have theories that we hit an age when we think we have to be good at something to do it, right? We make art unabashedly when we're really little, and then we hit a place where we say, well, I'm not an artist, so I'm going to stop making art. Let's keep making art. Let's keep playing in the mud. Let's keep doing these things that just remind us of our aliveness.
Yeah, why don't we do more? And we all have to fit into a box. That's my theory. We have to fit into a box. I'm from Switzerland and I went to an all-girls school. And when I went to a career counselor, she said, your mom was an administrative assistant. You're a secretary at that time. I was like, okay, yeah. It got me to where I am today with learning the business. Nothing wrong with this. But it could have been more.
Yeah. How have you broken out of your own box?
Moving to New York, that was the best thing that happened to me.
Oh.
People were saying, what if you don't like it? I never asked me that question. I was young. New York sounds like a very cool place for the airline, working on Fifth Avenue. What is there not to like? And then in New York, I was able to become a running coach. I was able to go to get my bachelor's, my master's, my coaching, my green card, everything. It has helped me to grow and blossom. And I always say, New York has taught me the good, the bad, and the ugly. I don't think we need to make it all glamorous. New York is a difficult place.
Yes.
Because it's so competitive. Because if you come to New York as a tourist, you see the Broadway and everything and the Sex and the City. And I'm like, yeah, that's exactly how life is not in New York.
New York is sort of a wonderful and challenging place, but it's also a wonderful metaphor. Everything is in New York. All the energy and all the different kinds of humans and all the different opportunities and challenges of life are all encompassed in this one little place. It's very big, but very little at the same time.
And you mentioned energy. It's the energy that's the city that never sleeps. You need to find, actually, it's very difficult. You need to find a balance that you are in tune with yourself. Maybe not everybody, but that's why I started to run in Central Park, that you need to find your inner self a little more, the quiet to rejuvenate, because it's not easy.
I live in Virginia and I've spent a good bit of time in New York and in Philadelphia, but Philadelphia is not the same as New York at all. Now I live in this it's not quite rural, but it's close. I live just 10 minutes outside of a city of 90,000 people. It's just this really little place. It's sort of an interesting, different version of the microcosm. It's got a very different energy and much more limited opportunities and much more limited challenges. And yet when we look around, we see whole humanness everywhere. Really, again, it reminds me of a mindfulness practice. Like, how am I being in this space? How am I taking advantages of the opportunities? How am I responding and growing from the challenges? I guess that's always available to us. I hadn't thought about it this way until just now. Thank you.
And I think there's challenges everywhere, but I also want to say there's opportunities everywhere. Change that from the negative into the positive. There's opportunities everywhere.
Absolutely. Absolutely. If we choose to look for them and embrace them. And I think for me, a lot of that goes back to what you were saying earlier, the goals, the journey versus the destination. And something that I ask myself a lot and that has really shaped my career in a lot of ways is, what are the trade-offs that I'm willing to make? What do I want to see in my daily life and the way that I'm living life now? And how does that impact the idea that I have for specific goals? How do those two aspects of life interact with each other? And how do they lead me to my decision making? More often than not, at least in recent years, I've chosen the daily life that I want over the shiniest goals. Not that I won't get to the shiniest goals, but that where I've put the bulk of my energy and my priority. Does that make sense?
Give us an example.
Yeah. Well, so one example is that my wife and I are very serious about local food, which takes a lot of time and it's a lot more expensive. Instead of, for example, spending 4 or 6 hours of my weekends working on projects that might get me to specific financial goals, I instead take that time to cook food. And instead of taking some of that money to to self-publish the book that is just hanging out in a Word document right now and may always, we're putting that toward supporting local farmers and having that kind of lifestyle. And I'm really, really comfortable. No, comfortable is not the right word. I'm really happy with those decisions. I get a lot of pleasure and joy out of the lifestyle of local foods and cooking in that really intensive way, and just being really engaged in life, right? In the whole life cycle in that way, and the whole economic landscape and what it means for creating more of the world that I want to see. It's just very values aligned for me. And it is a meaningful trade-off.
I'm with you. Have the local foods. We don't eat strawberries in December when they're not in season. As a coach, you can pick and choose. I had a lovely podcast with a sound healer, and she says, when my calendar is full for the week, then you have to look at the next week. Be mindful with yourself when we're teaching mindfulness to others.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And really, and embedded in what you just said, I heard beware of always and never thinking. I'm constantly making decisions, mostly unconsciously, How do we make more of those decisions consciously and be open again to the opportunities that surround us?
What you do when you don't work?
Oh, yes. Now that I cook a lot when I don't work.
Well,
we also have a little dog. She's not little. She's 50 pounds of muscle and big head, who takes a lot of energy and provides a lot of delight. You got to make sure we get our tug sessions and our fetch sessions in. I'm also a very low key but delighted hiker and yoga practitioner. Those tend to be a pretty full life put together. Oh, and my zines. Oh my gosh, I love making my little wabi sabis.
Maybe not everybody knows what a zine is.
They're little handmade, really magazines. It's really short for magazines. I print them at home and I fold them and I staple them. It's just very, very hands-on. It really sort of takes me back to my teen years we were talking about earlier, and allowing myself creativity without it needing to mean anything or lead anywhere. When people buy them, it's just sort of delightful. Oh, somebody else is enjoying this too. How wonderful. But there's no pressure on the outcome. There's just delight in creating them. Yeah, it's just a way for me to sort of process. I like to take everything that I learn and sort of immediately put it back out into the world, because I learn from sharing as well. I think we all do. My zines are just sort of a fun conduit for bringing it in and sending it on back out.
Is it Word? How can we envision that?
Yeah, most of them are the size of a quarter page of a standard piece of paper. I've cut them in half and folded them in half. Most of them, well, they're all words. Most of them so far are workbooks. Yeah. For example, I have one, the first one I made was a riff off of a Kurt Vonnegut quote. He said his uncle would say that everybody should stop every so often and say, if this isn't nice, I don't know what is. And so it's a mindfulness practice and a gratitude practice. Took that sentence and I took out the word this. It's just, if blank isn't nice, I don't know what is. And I have that written over and over and over again with a reminder to pause and really take a moment with whatever that nice thing is, really absorb the feeling of that niceness. And what I found is that using that format myself gives me a lot of attention to detail. Oh, if that daffodil that's just now poking out of the earth and unfolding its leaves isn't nice, I don't know what is. Yeah.
I don't know what is.
I don't know what is.
I think we end on that positive note.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. What are you taking away? Bigger lives and better business. Take it from the Iron Woman. We have episodes every Monday. Come and join us. We have interesting people with great stories. Don't miss out. And Take It from the Iron Woman is also the book Global Business Coaching with Sports Parallels. Get it in your local bookstore or download it. Thank you for your support. We'll see you next time.